Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We hope you've had a chance to watch Crip Camp, A Disability Revolution. We are thrilled for you to be here during these uncertain and isolating times as we talk with my dear friends, Judy Heumann and Neal and Denise Jacobson, about their experiences at Camp Jeanette and their lifetimes of advocacy for equality and the full inclusion of people with disabilities in our society. My name is Colleen Starkloff, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Starkloff Disability Institute. My late husband, Max Starkloff, and I, along with our dear friend, David Newberger, all persons with disabilities, established the Starkloff Disability Institute in 2003 to meet a continued need in the disability community. Max and I have been working in the disability rights movement for over 30 years, but we continue to see people with disability facing high rates of poverty, unemployment, and isolation. Meaningful employment gives people a sense of pride, a valuable income, and a way to connect with and contribute to their communities. People with disabilities face barriers, physical, social, and attitudinal. And when they tried to join the workforce, when they tried to join the workforce, we founded the Starkloff Disability Institute to level the playing field. We empower adults and young people with disabilities with the skills and confidence they need to get the jobs that they love. We work with corporations to attract, hire, and retain employees with disabilities, some of the most creative and innovative employees out there. And we educate our community about how to create a world without barriers that welcomes everyone to participate fully. This is our first time hosting a large public event in this virtual space. So we ask for your patience tonight and for your help in creating an engaging and thoughtful conversation. We are very excited to have ways to connect with everyone while we are all safely at home. I want to thank Signing Edge for providing interpreters for this evening's discussion. Signing Edge is a deaf-owned interpreting company based in St. Louis. We also have live captions for the event provided by ACS Captions. SDI's youth programs team has put together a worksheet for high school students and college students to further explore ableism after watching Crip Camp. If you are an educator and would like to use the worksheet with your students, please contact Blair Dammerman. We will put her email address in the chat box. And now I want to introduce you to Scott Thompson, Starkloff Disability Institute's Development Director and the tech host of the evening, to explain some of the features we will be using tonight. Scott.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. We know this is new for many people, but you've done a great job with the technology already because you're here. Before we get started with the discussion, here's a few things to know. We have muted and disabled video for all of you in the audience so everyone can hear the central conversation. If you look at the bar at the bottom of the video screen, you'll see some tools to use, including turning on closed captions. We will be starting with many of the great questions people submitted when they registered for this event. If you have a question for Judy, Denise, or Neal, please click on the Q&A in that bottom bar and type your question in the pop-up box. Our team will be keeping an eye on the Q&A box to collect questions, and we will do our best to answer them later in the program. Feel free to comment and engage throughout the evening and utilizing the chat room, also on the bar at the bottom. You can continue the conversation with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn by searching Starkloff Disability Institute and using hashtags CripCamp and SDI CripCamp. Now let's get back to Colleen so she can introduce our wonderful guests and get the conversation started.
Well, I'm really pleased to have the stars of Crip Camp online here with us. Judy Heumann's not here yet, but she's my sister and very longtime friend, and a former board member of the Starkloff Disability Institute. She'll be joining us soon. From her time as a counselor at Camp Jeanette to leading the 504 sit-in, founding the World Institute on Disability with Ed Roberts and Joan Leon, serving at the U.S. Department of Education, the World Bank, and the U.S. State Department as the first special advisor on international disability rights, Judy has always been leading the way for equality and inclusion of people with disabilities. Her book, Being Human, an unrepentant memoir of a disability rights activist, was just released in February. I hope you're all going to get her book. I also have two dear friends from California, Denise, Cher Jacobson, and Neal Jacobson. Denise is a writer and educator who shared the story of her family in her memoir, The Question of David, a disabled mother's journey through adoption, family, and life. Neal retired from Wells Fargo Bank as a senior vice president and founded Abilicor, a business innovation consulting company. As you remember from the film, they both attended Camp Jeanette and remain active members of our vibrant disability rights community. Neal and Denise, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. So I think what I want to do, we have tons of questions. So I want to get right into them if we can. And so we're going to try to ask you guys to give brief answers so we can get to as many questions as we can. But I do want to, there's a question from April in Missouri, and she says, how do you feel young people can engage in advocacy at this time? What do you feel are the most important issues to address? Neal's response to that is as follows. I don't see myself as an advocate in the same way as Judy is an advocate. My career has not been fighting for the rights of people with disabilities. My career has been as an IT professional at Wells Fargo. My advocacy has been living the good life, enjoying wonderful family and friends, being active in my local community, serving on boards. He says further, I'm more concerned that young adults with disabilities don't believe that there's always a way to live life the way they want, regardless of what society says. Yes, we must fight for rights, but we must not wait. Thanks for that response, Neal. Madeline in Bridgeton, Missouri said, well, that's a question for Judy. We'll wait till Judy comes. This one is for you, Denise. This mother says, I'm the mother of twin daughters with multiple disabilities. They both have CP and autism. I worry about their future. You want to take that one, Denise?
Yes. First of all, it's very important to set up a support system first for yourself and then for your kids.
Can I repeat that part?
Yes.
First, it's important to set up a support system first for your child and then for your kids.
As a mother, I know that without my friends and other people, I would have been screwed.
As a mother, I know that without my friends and the support of other people, I would have been screwed.
And give yourself permission to ask for help.
And give yourself permission to ask for help.
Because people won't know that you need help unless you ask.
Because people won't know you need help unless you ask for it. Is that it? Thanks, Denise. Okay, so Karen in St. Louis wants to know, what empowered you the most to serve in your critical advocacy role? And Neal sent this response. I need to give my parents credit. As Holocaust survivors, they were very scared about my survival. They insisted that I always do better and never give up. I've known Neal for years. This man never, ever gives up. Okay, so let's see. Do we have Judy yet? I can't see the camera.
Yeah.
We do have Judy. Judy, are you on? Okay, we don't have Judy yet. Mary Jane in Grand Rapids, Michigan asks, how do we keep this fight for justice and equality alive today? Which tactics are and are not working? And Neal, who never gives up, says, today money speaks louder than ever. Our movement sees us and portrays us as poor. While most people with disabilities are in fact poor, it is also a mindset. As immigrants, my parents were very poor. They taught us that whatever we had was enough to survive and to save. Money begets money. Okay, so let's continue on here. And Judy's having trouble trying to get on. She's having trouble with the connection. Can somebody call Judy, please, and help her to get on? Thanks. So, November in Missouri wants to know if you think the current COVID-19 restrictions will result in less ableism after this is all done. Neal's response is, unfortunately, I don't. Ableism will only be lessened when we get out there and live life as we want. The next question Denise wants to respond to. Donna in Mohawk, New York wants to know if you think the success of the camp was based in the times, or do you think there's an opportunity in replicating it today?
I think the camp had an ideology. The ideology was that everyone had a voice.
The camp has an ideology, and the ideology is that everyone has a voice.
And if you look at growing up with a disability, you're aware that everyone was telling you what to do, how to feel, what was best for you.
When you grow up with a disability, you get very used to people telling you what to do, how to feel, what's best for you.
And when we went to Camp Jeanette, it was the first time that we had the opportunity to use our voice, and that was really empowering.
So when we went to Camp Jeanette, it was the very first time that we had the opportunity to use our voice, and that was very empowering. So there are camps, there's a lot of camps, if I can just pursue this with you for a second, that are very focused on kids with disabilities. But watching Crip camp, I don't think those kids in these camps today get to do what you guys were doing. I don't think so.
Actually, there were other camps. There was a camp called Corolla, which I think was pretty similar. Linda
Just as
some other people went there. Yeah.
So ladies and gentlemen, I'm joined by my sister, Judy Heumann, who was having technical difficulties, but we're just delighted to have you, Judy. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I needed a new link.
That's okay, honey. Glad you're here. So one of the questions that Charlie Carr in Massachusetts wants to know from Judy, if you can tell us, who were your role models growing up?
I think my mother, Mrs. Roosevelt, and then friends of mine who had disabilities that we were of the same age. So not the typical mentor with older disabled people. Eunice Fiorito was older than I was, and I met her when I was about in 1972. So in some ways she became a mentor. But I think when we were younger, we mentored each other, which is, I think, something very important, because I think having mentors is critical. But I also think one of the things that we did at that point was we kind of worked with what we had. And now I think in many ways, some people are waiting for permission to be able to do things. And I feel like, just like we did, kind of move it forward.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Judy. Madeline in St. Louis wants to know what your thoughts are on the majority of the comments of the movie calling it inspirational. And that's for anybody who wants to answer that. Jude, go ahead.
I mean, I know that there's controversy about the word inspirational in the community, but quite frankly, I think there are legitimate usages for the word. And I don't think people are necessarily talking about individual people, but rather the collectivity of the film. And I think, you know, what we did and what people continue to do, people talk about women in the women's movement as being inspirational, certain leaders in other movements as being inspirational. So for me, I don't want to get into a discussion with people about the word. I want to get into a discussion about, okay, so if they've been inspired, what have they been inspired to do? You know, have they just been inspired by what we've done, or are they inspired now to do more, whether they have a disability or not, and what are they looking at doing?
Yeah, thanks, Judy. Charmaine in Texas wants to know where you see our movement going today. Judy?
Well, I think our movement is becoming a broader, more cross-disability community, which I think is very important. Actually,
Do you want to explain cross-disability for those who may not be familiar with the term, Judy?
Sure. So it's not people with like polio or cerebral palsy or depression or hepatitis, whatever it may be. Not just working within our own stovepipe, but working across disabilities. So people with intellectual disabilities, mental health disabilities, various forms of physical disabilities, visible, invisible disabilities, cross race, cross religion, cross sexual orientation, kind of throw it all in the pot and work together at the same time. That I think it's very important that we have to ensure that issues that are particularly important to us are not being swallowed up. So, you know, as a woman who's Jewish and has a disability, those three issues for me are very important. And I want to be able to look at those three issues. For someone who's African American or Latino or Asian or bisexual or whatever it may be, those aspects of themselves need to be something that can be valued and integrated into people's lives. So I think our movement is really looking at some of these issues in a more serious way. And there are more and more leaders that are emerging, coming from a broader range of the community. My concern today, what I was saying a few minutes ago, versus like 6 weeks ago. I think the coronavirus is something we have to be very concerned about. Not just today. I mean, right now the issue is, are people getting the preventative information they need? Are people getting the personal assistance they need? If they're getting sick and they need to go in the hospital, are we assured that they're going to get appropriate services, not based on discrimination on disability? And over the next number of months, that will change. But what I'm concerned about is what is going to be happening over the next year. Our society is going through very significant changes right now. I think we can't deny the economic implications that are happening. And I think we're going to have to really be paying close attention and actively working to ensure that as things are being resurrected and redeveloped, and as we put our society together here in the US and around the world, that disabled people are not thrown down to the bottom of the discussion. So part of what I think is very important is that there are organizations now, someone needs to mute their phone. What I think is important is there are state organizations, that there are national organizations, that there are international organizations that have been focusing on disability more in the last 10 years than in previous years. And we're going to have to be looking towards the future as we're re-looking at what is going to happen to make sure that we, as I've been saying, don't fall behind. But I think it's something, you know, we have to really seriously be looking at, because today is not what it was 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's so true, Judy. And I know it's hard to, when everybody's getting laid off and everything. I think our people are the poorest of those who are living in poverty, and finding ways to also improve employment opportunities for people with disabilities as we go forward and lift our people out of poverty is also important for us.
Yeah, and I think
you're
what's
right.
going on now is people with disabilities who've been working are losing jobs also. And
Right.
whether those jobs are going to come back, or whether we're going to be increasing the population of disabled people in poverty, as well as continuing to look at pulling people who have been in poverty out of poverty. I just think we're going to have to be doing things much smarter and much more aggressively.
Absolutely. So we're kind of hopping around with these questions, but I do want to make sure that a lot of people who sent them in advance get a chance.
Yeah.
What?
Neal wants to say something.
Oh, sorry, Neal.
Could you read this? Could you read this?
Could you what? Could you what? Yes.
Could I repeat the question, Neal?
No.
Oh, okay.
Judy.
Yes.
Judy just said.
Because the skies to be sandbox.
Scott, could you read this scan box?
The chat box.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Scott,
Yeah.
did you post a comment?
Yeah.
Okay. Scott, you want to read Neal's comment, please, in the chat box? Thanks, Neal. Scott, do you see his comment?
I'm looking.
Does it say, Neal, we also need disabled-owned businesses, enterprises?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh, we gotta pick it. Having our own business.
We have to begin to have our own businesses.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
Neal, you.
we are the only. We are the only.
We are the only.
large
Majority.
but for our business.
That doesn't support
Yeah.
our own businesses.
Yes.
Neal, you'll be glad to know, and I'll reiterate, that the sign language interpreting is being done by a deaf-owned sign
Yes.
language interpreting
Yes.
company. So
Yay.
that's great. Jamie Frost, right. Okay, let's try to keep going here, guys. Rhonda in Michigan wants to know, how do you engage people with intellectual and disability, how do you engage people with intellectual and developmental disabilities? I think that kind of came out in the film, but perhaps she means just in life in general today. I don't know, I can't tell.
I mean, I think there are many organizations that are doing this, not as many as should. But, you know, in a previous discussion I was in, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network was an organization which was identified as one that really does some very important work on bringing together people with autism and other disabled people with intellectual disabilities and other kinds of disabilities. They work very effectively. There are more and more organizations run by disabled people with intellectual disabilities. And I think, you know, it's a great question. And ultimately, the organizations that we may be involved with, we need to be looking at our board of directors and looking at the diversity on our boards and on our staff, and look at what we're doing to ensure that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are in fact not only being brought on board, but are on staff, and that we need to be working within various communities to make sure that the work that we are doing is inclusive of these different populations of people.
Yeah, thank you. So I think you answered this one. Judy, Brenda wants to know if people were people with disabilities afraid of rationed care during the polio epidemic like they are during COVID-19.
I don't know, I was 18 months old, but I think society, it's a good question, because I'm not an epidemiologist, so don't hold me to what I'm saying. But I've been looking at some of the data around polio and epidemics of polio over the 1800s and 1900s. The numbers were pretty significant percentage-wise of disabled people who, people who contracted polio who died. Again, I think the numbers were pretty significant. What I think, you know, many of the people who had polio, like myself, were children. I think one of the differences about what's going on today is because the virus is, at least at this point, appearing as if it's affecting more people who are older, 20 and older. There's a different set of needs, because, you know, when you're a child, typically it's your family that's taking care of you. Yes, there were some people who were getting polio when they were in their 20s and 30s and 40s, but the reason it was called, I'm forgetting the name, infantile paralysis.
Yeah, right.
Infantile paralysis is because it did impact more infants than adults. So I think the issues were different now than they were then.
Denise, J.P. Goldman in Maryland says that it appeared from the film footage that most campers were in their teens or mid-teens. Did the camp serve younger ones too?
Before 1968, they served kids, teenagers, and there was a fire in the winter of 1968, and the fire burned down a lot of the buildings. So when the camp reopened in 1970, they didn't have room for the little kids, but the little kids were served at other camps. And when you got to be a teenager, most of the camps didn't serve teenagers. So Jeanette was one of the few that did.
So you want me to repeat, Denise?
Yeah, go ahead, Judy.
Okay, so step in where I don't have it complete. Denise said that the camp did serve younger people until I believe was 1966. And there was a
No,
1968. And then there was a fire. And when the camp reopened in 1970,
70.
Denise?
Yeah.
In 1970, it was couldn't serve younger kids, but they were younger kids were being served at other camps, and there were a limited number of camps that were serving teenagers. I went to a camp called Camp Oakhurst from sometime in the late 50s until I think 62 or 63, when I started going to Jeanette. Yeah, the time that the film was made, there were no kids, I think, younger than what, 12 or 13?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
There's a question here that was here for,
sorry.
there was something here for Neal.
Yeah, I'm going to that.
Lori Becker. Because I'd like to follow up on Neal's comment on business enterprises. Do businesses owned by disabled people have minority-owned status, as other minority-owned businesses have? Are federal contractors required to do a certain amount of business with companies owned by disabled people? And as a former small business owner and a disabled person, I do not believe this is the case. This only applied to race and gender. Expansion of this law and disability would provide disabled people tremendous economic power. You want to answer that, Neal?
Well, that is great. She's the black of disabled people.
Neal is saying that you're correct. 688 does not cover disabled people. In answer to your second part of the question about whether or not contractors have to do business with disabled-run businesses, I think Neal would say the answer is no. But under Section 503, they do have an obligation to hire disabled people, up to 7%.
Right. If they're federal contractors.
Yeah, that's what she was talking about.
So guys, I'm going to ask Neal and Judy about this one. Mariel from Los Angeles says, in the last 30 years post-ADA, What policy advocacy issues regarding people with disabilities do you feel are the most important? And of course, here's Neal's answer, and this is going to come as no surprise to anybody. The most important policy issue that I'm working on is ensuring that healthcare for all includes long-term community-based support services. Judy, you want to add to that too?
No. Mhm.
Judy,
Neal,
last 30 years, post-ADA, most important policy issues regarding people with disabilities.
Neal, were you saying something though?
No.
Okay. What do I see as the most important policy issues that we've been working on over the last 30 years?
No, yeah, in the last 30 years and post-ADA, so
Yeah.
going forward.
What do I consider the most important policy issues?
Policy issues, yeah.
Well, I think the policies that have been working on implementation of the Olmstead Act, getting people out of nursing homes, keeping them out of nursing homes, providing support services in the community. I think all of that has been very important. Strengthening the Centers for Independent Living is another issue that I think has been very important, and really working on issues around enforcement of the ADA and other laws, Section 501, 503, 504. I think all those things have been very important. And I think, as Neal was saying, you know, the ACA certainly has been very beneficial for disabled people, but too many people are still not receiving the breadth of services that they need. And I think part of what Neal was talking about was what some of us might call long-term care services,
Right.
and how, you know, if you have a disability, you're not eligible to apply, or you can apply, but you will be rejected for long-term care services. So many people who have more significant disabilities and need personal assistance, like Neal, Denise, and myself, are not able to get those kinds of supports in most states, because Neal and Denise are in California. They're lucky they're part of a special program that California has, which covers people who have developmental disabilities, and personal assistance services is a service they can get. I'm not eligible for any personal assistance service support program, as are many other people like myself. If you're eligible for like a Medicaid program, typically speaking, the hours are limited, and the income level that you're allowed to have is so low that people who are working typically are not going to qualify for the program. So I would say healthcare, and including long-term care and personal assistance, is a critical issue. I also think the issue of sign language interpreters and services, readers and other kinds of services and other support services for people who have intellectual or developmental disabilities is something that needs to be included under this blanket, and it really isn't in most cases.
No, that's really true. So Denise, I think this is a question for you. Becky in Birch Tree, Missouri wants to know, what do you think is the most important skill, attitude, attribute a student with disabilities needs to gain employment? Neal gave an answer to that, but then I'll let you, and I'll repeat the question if you want me to. Neal's answer is enthusiasm and excitement are the two main things I look for when I hire people.
I would add self-esteem, confidence, and experience. I think that we need to have higher expectations of disabled kids, that they need to be given responsibilities very and more when they're teenagers, so that they can develop the skills and the self-esteem that are required when they go out and look for employment.
Did you get all that, Judy?
Sorry. I think we were moving around here because it's supper
Okay, I
time.
got it. Self-esteem, confidence, and experience, and that especially we have to start challenging little kids to, I'm inserting the word dream bigger about their futures, because I forgot what Denise said. But the point is that then as these kids grow up and become teenagers, they need to get jobs and they need to gain experience and they need to expect more of themselves, and we need to expect more of young people with disabilities. Is that pretty close, Denise?
I also think, yes, Denise, was that right?
Yeah.
I also think that we have to stop just talking about children and young adults, because the majority of disabled people are neither children nor young adults. I don't want to exclude them from the discussion, but I think it's really important when we're looking at the issue of employment that we're looking at the entire population. One of the issues, I think, not just for disabled people, regardless of the age, is the issue of education. And I think we need to be paying a lot more attention to the education that people are getting or not getting and their qualifications for jobs. I mean, clearly, you know, as Neal and Denise have been saying, and others, and Colleen, you know, the issue of enthusiasm and the belief that they can work is clearly very important. But the reality is people need to have the skills for the jobs that they need. And the skills are academic and the skills are technological. And I worry too frequently that people, regardless of the age, are not being given appropriate assessments on the kind of technology that they could be using in order to do their jobs. And in too many cases, people are not really learning what they need to learn to advance in the fields that are moving forward. And I think, you know, now we can just look at what's happening all across the United States with the fact that millions of children are not in school right now. And if you're a poor child, regardless of disability, you're having a much more difficult time because of lack of access to the internet, lack of technology, and disabled students are having an even more difficult time if in fact they're needing other kinds of supports. So I really want to get back to where we are right now. And I think we really, in emphasizing employment, which obviously is critical, we need, I believe, to really be able to be in the middle of the discussion that's going to go on and be much more demanding, not just of disabled people, but of the system itself, to be able to help ensure that not just disabled people, but others are really being given the training they need for the job skill sets that we need today.
Thus said the former Assistant Secretary in the Department of Education, Office of Special Ed and Rehab. Thank you, Judy Heumann. Judy, here's a question I think for you. Bridget Moore is running for office in St. Louis. She's a woman with a disability, and she wants to know, what can local politicians do to advocate for the disability community?
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
What can local politicians do to advocate for the disability community?
Well, I think the question is, what can we do to ensure that local politicians are including disabled people in the work in their agenda?
That's what she wants to do.
Okay, so, I mean, I think really it's at the local level, are disabled people and others really engaged with their politicians as like plans are being developed, 3 to 5 year plans at the city level. You know, where is their money going? Is it going into supporting job development, business development programs. How are they including disabled people in those programs? And there you're looking at policy, you're looking at budgeting, and you're looking at actual what's going on at the staff level. I think in too many cities and counties and states, disabled people are not yet being equally integrated into the breadth of programs that are very important for us. And they're not going to be unless we continue to play a stronger and stronger role. I mean, on a positive level, I think, you know, looking at the 3 bills thus far that have come out of the Congress dealing with issues around,
The pandemic.
sorry?
The pandemic.
The pandemic, yeah. There are some good things that are happening, but I think the question is great because it's local. And what it means is that as people in our local communities, we need to be engaged, not just on issues that deal with disability, but we need to be involved in city planning, in water, in education, in everything, because everything does impact us. And it means that we really need to be having, I think, the ears of legislators and policymakers to make sure that they are looking to bring disabled people in their districts onto these committees and commissions. And we need to be doing a lot more grassroots work than I think is happening in many communities.
Here's a question from Rochester, New York. Jensen says, why doesn't the disability community have the power it had then? Meaning, I think back before when we were advocating for 504 and ADA. Was it just good timing, and how can we build it again? Neal's response to that is, we need more political and economic power. We need to start investing in disabled-owned business enterprises. We need to lobby professionally. Jude, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think we need to look at the fact, and Rochester, I think, is an example. I think the Rochester community is pretty engaged with local government, both through the CIL and through Rochester Technical Institute for the Deaf and other programs. So I would say that it's not exactly a parallel for the following reason. What we were able to do in 1975, 76, 77 is through the development of the American Association of People with Disabilities, which was a national cross-disability coalition. AAPD really was working across the United States as the 504 regulations were coming out for comment and getting people to submit comments and organize comments, so that when the next draft of 504 came out, the one that we were ultimately fighting for in 1977, there had been significant numbers of comments that had come forward. Now, we were not organizing for the 504 regulations at a local level because it was a national piece of legislation. What happened in California was because Ed Roberts was the director of the Department of Rehabilitation, and he had used money to set up 10 centers for independent living in California. So by 1976, California had the most centers for independent living in the country because there were like 1 or 2 of them that were in Michigan and Massachusetts, for example. So we were able to really force the signing of the 504 regulations because in California, we had really been doing a lot of work and a lot of it was local. So we did get the support, not only of our congressional delegation, but our city council and county boards, because the disability community was really locally organizing. And then because of the work that AAPD had been doing, you know, we were also able at the national level to put pressure. So I think we need to continue to strengthen our local work, our county work, our state work, and our federal work, as I've been saying. And yes, Neal is right on business, absolutely. But I think we have to recognize the fact that You know, we're looking at healthcare, we're looking at the environment, we're looking at multiple issues that we need to educate ourselves more on so that we can be valued resources in our communities.
So I'm looking, there was one question about the engagement of the Black Panthers, and I can't find that question. So I'm going to look for it, but I'd like to open up the conversation to people who've been, we've got more questions. We have more questions that we can answer, but there are some people who've sent in some through the through our question and answer page, and I'd like Scott to bring those up, and I'll look for that other
Sure.
question I wanted to bring up.
Sure.
So Scott,
absolutely.
have we got some?
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of questions, and again, thank you all for submitting so many great questions before and during the panel. I've got a question from Sarah Schwiegel, Judy. She's here in St. Louis. She said, in the film, you said you were tired of being excited about accessible bathrooms. Can you tell us the best accessible bathrooms you've experienced while traveling?
Can I tell you what?
The best accessible restrooms that you've experienced while traveling.
Oh, well, honestly.
How about the one in Frankfurt, Judy, when we went in the bathroom in Frankfurt?
The one in Japan. Well, I think, you know, that particular scene for me in the film is still very emotional, honestly, because, you know, what I was talking about there was the fact that we're still having, and today it's less so in the United States, but it's still true in some places in the US, but certainly around the world where bathrooms are not accessible. And so my point in that was, if we're still fighting for people to understand that we have a right to go to the bathroom like anybody else, whenever we need to, like anybody else, it really speaks to, I think, people's views towards us or lack of seeing us. Because, you know, the reality is we go on airplanes every day, or we used to go on airplanes every day, and the bathrooms were accessible for non-disabled people. And I was on a committee once which was discussing bathrooms and for airplanes. And I said, well, if you can't make the bathroom accessible for those of us with disabilities, let's have no bathrooms on the airplanes. And I was totally serious, and the room went very quiet, and people did not get that I was totally serious. Why should other people be able to have bathrooms on an airplane or other places when we can't? The only way people will understand what this means is if they cannot go to the bathroom also. If they have to wear diapers on an airplane or wherever because they can't get to the bathroom. And these, I think, are very basic issues that we don't like to discuss. And when I talked about that at that meeting, it's not easy to talk about having to go to the bathroom, right? But I think it's a very basic issue. And I think it speaks much more broadly to the issues that we still face as disabled people. People are still not understanding the barriers that exist. They're still not understanding the roles that they're playing in allowing these barriers to exist and in enabling discrimination to exist when people are not fighting for change. This week, some of you may have seen on the Google Doodle on Thursday, there was an honoring of a doctor who worked in polio research, which was great. And there was a picture of a young disabled woman standing on crutches with a brace, and the doctor to her right. And there was a big mirror. And when you looked at the reflection in the mirror, the young girl did not have any braces or crutches. And the doctor's reflection in the mirror had the doctor holding the crutches. I wrote about that because it was very disturbing to me, because it clearly was saying that people believe that we are not satisfied with our lives having disabilities, and that then a couple of people wrote who clearly didn't have disabilities, who were saying, well, what's wrong with giving people hope and blah, blah. And then quite a number of disabled people weighed in talking about exactly this issue, you know, pride in who we are. And I think the best thing that came out of that discussion was a woman who juxtaposed over the mirror the poster that came out of the 1992 demonstrations in New York with Justin Dark and Mark Bristow and myself and many other people saying injustice against one is injustice against all, Martin Luther King. But that discussion where people couldn't get that we would not feel positive about seeing our reflections without crutches and braces when we need them to be able to do things. I think that's a level that we're still at.
Yeah, thank you. Is there another question?
I do, and this is a follow-up. I think it's a good follow-up question to this one. This is from Becky Romaine. In the documentary, Jim Lebrecht said, the bar that I had set for myself, that I had to overcome my disability, it had taken a toll on me. It was denying a part of who I am. As a pre-employment specialist and teacher of the visually impaired certified orientation and mobility specialist, how do I make sure that the goals I set for my students are not designed to overcome their disabilities, but stay true to their disability and don't lead my students to deny a part of who they are?
First of all, you should not be setting a goal for your students. Your students should be setting their own goal. And you need to be supporting them. And I think getting a better understanding of who they are to see if in the establishment of their goals, they're not recognizing their disability as both a positive thing within their life and whether or not they may need any accommodations in order to be able to move forward in what they may be. And I think also, I think it sounds like you have a disability yourself. And if that's true, I think being able to have discussions with the people you're working with that can be in a meaningful way, allowing people to also understand, as Jimmy was saying, how these things impacted it. I've got the hiccups. How these things were impacting him and how over the years he's dealt with that. And Neal is going to say something.
You can help people figure out what are the real causes. What do they really want to do?
What do they really want?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
Making sure that
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
I think we have to figure out what are the real goals, what are the things where they hope to get better.
What are they really saying? What are they, what now?
What are they really saying? What they say? We want to get better.
Or what are they really saying when they're saying we want to get
Yeah,
better?
yeah.
I think part of what you said, Neal, was that they need to be able to figure out their own goals, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Say that? Yeah.
The real goal.
They're real goals.
Yeah.
Career goals.
Career or real?
Career or personal.
Career.
Yeah, personal or career goals, right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, I want to say that I think we need to recognize that life is incremental. And by that I mean, and this is where I think having mentors, some of whom have disabilities, some of whom don't, the issue is helping people pursue careers that they're interested in. Careers are changing. They're constantly changing. So unlike all of us, when we were at camp and we were pursuing things for the future, the model at that point was people got a job and pretty much stayed in that job the rest of their life. Now that changed as we were growing up, as we got older, and I think that was something. But look at people like Neal. Neal, you had one job. You worked in Wells Fargo for decades.
And became a vice president.
Yeah, but I mean, he moved up within the organization, and he had the skills that he had, which continued to improve and were used within the company. But he didn't go from company A to company B. He was never an independent contractor. There are all kinds of things that are going on right now that are also potentially adversely affecting not just disabled individuals, but others. So I think what's very important for us, those of us, you know, who are not necessarily really on top of what's going on in education, what is really going on in the world of work, we need to be supporting people in helping them think about what it is they want to be pursuing over the course of their life. And I don't expect someone at a young age to come in saying, this is what I want to do. I want people to think about what their interests and their desires are, the kinds of changes they want to make, help guide them in education, help make sure that they're staying in school and getting the support they need and getting the work experiences they need, and that setting up their own businesses is an option for them. But I get really concerned because today, you know, we're seeing, when you listen to stations like NPR and others, significant mental health issues that young people are experiencing, issues around testing and other things, and weighing, you know, competing against each other, and what that is doing for kids, for young adults. So I think it's important for us really to take what we know about our lives, to share that information, but also to really listen to younger people and others, to learn about some of the new things that are going on. And right now, I think over the next year, there are going to be lots of new things that we're going to have to do paying a lot of attention to. You look at the suicide rate amongst young people. I mean, those people are all disabled individuals, people who have mental health issues that are not getting the support that they need. So I think there's complexities here that we as adults need to be part of those solutions.
I mean, I think when you have a teenager that says, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be an actress, I think what you need to explore is why. What do they think the benefits are to becoming a teacher or an actress or a writer? I think it's important to go deeper and to really figure out what people want.
Denise, let me see if I can repeat this. Denise was using a couple of examples someone wants to be a teacher or they want to be an actress. And we need to be talking with them about why they want to be working in those fields and help them explore not only why, but how and what they need in order to be able to do that. And I would add on to that, you know, I wanted to be a teacher, but I had no classroom experience. And when I went into the classroom, I had only taken 3 teacher courses because at that time, that's all that was required. So I had never, as many teachers still today, I think, entered the classroom with the kinds of qualifications that one needs to be able to be a good teacher. So I think, you know, if you have a disability or not, wanting to go into teaching and talking to people about why they want to go into teaching and helping people really get a good understanding of what is being taught in the classrooms today and what are the kinds of classes that they need to be taking in order to be able to be a successful teacher so they can feel confident as an example. I think those are discussions that are not necessarily happening with disabled or non-disabled people. So again, I think when we talk about, you know, advancing disabled people in various areas, and now we're talking about employment, I think we need to be a part of the discussion that's not just focusing on disabled people and work. We need to be a part of the bigger discussion, which goes in many directions. You know, we need to look at what are the best employment training programs in our community, and are they bringing disabled people into those programs? How are we taking our knowledge and expertise and integrating them into those programs? You know, we need to be more, we need to be involved in high schools, but we also need to be involved with people who had jobs where they might have become injured and not had the highest level of education. We need to be demanding that more money go into vocational rehabilitation. We need to be demanding that people are getting the training that they need and that they're not having to go into debt when they go to school. I mean, the system itself needs significant revamping. And I think that really will enable us to work with people who have disabilities when they got their disabilities at different points in their lives to really evaluate what they know, where they want to go, and what they need, and trying to ensure that people are not only getting the technical knowledge, but they're getting the support as a disabled individual, as an individual, to be able to move in the world of work, into the world of work, and maintain their jobs and move up.
One of the reasons this is so important is that we have never in the history of the disability rights movement, and we've fought for employment for people with disabilities since this movement started. We've never had a better time than now because of diversity and inclusion efforts by corporations and 503 now being enacted. So having a ready and able workforce that has very diverse skills is critically important. I found that question. Oh, go ahead, Neal.
Okay. We also have how they will help the company, how they will help the business. We focus a lot about what we begin to talk about what the
Yep, Neal, I didn't get that. We focus a lot on what?
How are we helping? How are we helping?
How are we helping?
The business.
How are we helping the business community?
How are we helping the businesses? Yeah. Well, I'm going to say that in what we're doing at the Starkloff Disability Institute is working to empower companies to understand people with disabilities, train them to be welcoming. They have, you know, most of the jobs handed out in this country are handed out by non-disabled recruiters and hiring managers, and they have a lot of questions about disability. We do help them. They want people with disabilities in the workforce now. Judy, I found a question here from Edgardo Vega Delgado in Puerto Rico, and Dorian Taylor in, I think in New York. I'm not sure where she's from. These questions have to do with other movements or groups that gave support to the independent living movement. For example, the Black Panthers, the LGBTTIQ. What ways did the civil rights movement and other Black disabled activists help influence the movement?
I think some of those questions need to be answered at the local level, but I would say during the 504 demonstrations, it wasn't just the Black Panthers. It was groups like Glide Memorial Church, which was led by a guy named the Reverend Cecil Williams, an African-American activist who was very inclusive of disability. Cesar Chavez and the Farm Workers Union was supportive of the work that we were doing. I would say that what we're seeing at the local level with disabled people from different backgrounds, Alice Wong, Sandy Ho, T.L. Lewis, disabled people around the country who have different disabilities and coming from different racial backgrounds. I think that's all really very important when talking about the film, Crip Camp, and the impact campaign that they've launched. The women that are heading up that organization are both disabled women and women of color who've been very involved in the disability community and in broader diversity movements. So I think, you know, Andrea Levant, whose business, and she is a small business owner, it's her company that's handling this project. And she worked for many years with Girl Scouts, and prior to that with a couple of disability-run projects. And Stacy, who also has come very much from the grassroots level, working in the disability community and in people of color movement. So I think, you know, new and emerging, I don't like talking about emerging, leaders who are younger, who are contributing and, you know, moving forward in their careers and in their personal lives, are really linking up with groups like Color of Change and other organizations that are really focusing on addressing issues of poverty and getting disability to be a part of the work that these groups are doing, which I think is really very important because they're connected locally within their communities and are able really to help identify disabled individuals of color and other backgrounds who can be brought into these organizations and begin to influence these organizations in a way that hopefully over the next 5 to 10 years will result in more inclusivity of disability in broader organizations that are also organizations of change.
Thank you. Scott, have we got another question?
Yeah, we've got, I think we've got time for really one more question. We're getting pushing the limits on the time that we've got left here. And we've got a question from Eva Reynolds, and this relates back to the film. Her question is, have you thought about how different life would be for you if you had not attended Camp Jeanette?
I guess Not really. I mean, I can theoretically think about it. What I would say is that if I hadn't attended Camp Jeanette and I didn't attend another camp, an important part of my life would not have emerged as it did at that time. Going to camp, as I started to do when I was 9, at Camp Oakhurst, really did allow me to begin to gain roots as a disabled person. And for me, although I was in classes for disabled kids, like Neal and I went to school together, I used to see him push his little chair and waddle his little butt down the hallway. But classes were different than camp because maybe during lunch period, we were able to have discussions in school that were, you know, relevant to us as disabled kids. But if I hadn't gone to camp at all, and I would have just been at home in the summer in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, my life would be very, very different. I wouldn't have had the same opportunities. I think meeting disabled people and becoming friends with disabled people and forming alliances, and really, I think, as Neal and Denise have been saying, you know, beginning to dream our dreams and beginning to recognize that in many ways we didn't have any real dreams because nobody had been encouraging us to really think about our futures. And when you look at that particular period of time, there were certain jobs that disabled people went into. If anybody was even thinking about you moving into a job outside of a sheltered workshop. So the dynamics are very different today than they were then. But I think that one of the issues, we're not going to deal with it now, but that we need really to be looking at is how do we help create opportunities that are substantive enough that enable disabled people, regardless of their age, to really have the experience that we had at camp and after, resulting in our believing in ourselves, creating an agenda that others didn't support, and fighting for it.
Denise? Yeah, good, Denise.
I want to add something.
Denise, do you mind if I interpret as we're going? Denise is saying I want to add something.
Going to camp helped me develop my identity.
My going to camp helped me develop my identity.
Away from my family.
Away from her family. And I think that was true for all of us and for all kids who go to camp.
Right.
You know, it's a different stage in one's life. Neal?
I got and I got out
I have to add that what I got out of camp. I have to add that what I got out of camp was
the how to have fun.
how to have fun.
How to have sex.
How to have sex.
Yeah.
Now, let me be very clear. Neal was sexually wasn't having sex yet.
Well, I see. We won't forget. We gotta fun.
We all forget that we have to have fun.
Yeah, go.
And you got a wife out of it, Neal.
Yeah.
That was a good thing. So listen, guys, we got a book author here. Judy wrote a book. Judy, I've been telling you for years you need to have a book, and then all of a sudden now you've got a book. Can you talk a little bit about...
You have the book there?
Huh?
You have the book there?
I don't have a copy of it. You mean to put up again? What, have you got one? Oh, there she goes. Well, so while we're waiting for Judy to come back and show us a copy of the book, I'm going to tell you that Denise wrote a book many years ago, 33 years ago, maybe 31, 32 years ago, The Question of David, all about David. She's going to get a copy of her book. Is it still available?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great.
Here's my
All
book.
these authors. Hold it up a little closer, Judy.
I can't.
Oh, that's right.
It's called Being Human, an unrepentant memoir of a disability rights activist.
And if
you
there's
can get
any
it-
word that's operative there, Judy, it's unrepentant.
Exactly.
Of course, you have nothing to repent for.
Well, I don't
Everything
know
that you've
about that.
done
But you
to
can-
help.
You can, Denise, your book is on Amazon too, right? Or
Yeah.
yeah, so you can get Denise's book on Amazon. It's called The Question of David. You can get my book on Amazon. You can get my book on the Independent Press. You can get my book also on Barnes and Noble.
And
the
I'd be a
other-
disgrace if I didn't say you could also get Max Starkloff and the Fight for Disability Rights on Amazon
Yes.
by Charles Claggett.
What's important is, okay, there are more disabled people who are writing books and having books published.
Right.
And we really need to be knowing more about these books. We need to support people who are writing these books. We need to get them to be a part of book clubs in our communities. And we need to get them to be more a part of what's going on in disability studies and cultural diversity studies and gender studies. Denise's book is a great book. And she's finished her second book, which is she's looking for a publisher right now. And it's all about her experiences at Camp Jeanette. So Alice Wong has a book out. She's got an anthology, which is coming out in June. Kia Brown has written a great book. She's a 28-year-old African-American lesbian woman with cerebral palsy, and she's smart and humorous and enjoys life. And Nadina, Nadina Laspina, has written a book that's also out, which is it's a story of her life from Italy to New York. She's also a disability rights activist. So we need to look at those books. And my book just came out about a month ago. Please buy it.
Well, then, and another reason to get these books is because they're really, really great stories.
Exactly.
They are really, really great stories. You want a good read, and if you don't understand about people with disabilities, these are good stories that actually bring you into our lives and help you to understand why would people stay in a building for 24 days, sleeping on the floor, begging for food. Why? Because it's important in our lives. You have some of the top stars, I think, in filmdom right now, with very deeply personal stories that matter, and that's the reason you guys signed up to listen to us tonight. I'm going to need to close this down, and I just want to say from my heart that I really thank all of you for joining us this evening. We are so glad that we were able to come together in this digital space during this time when we can't be together physically. And I Judy and Neal and Denise, I love you guys. And I really appreciate—
Thank you, Colleen, and all your staff. Just about 2 weeks ago, came up with this idea and really put this together. So thank you and everybody that we can't see right now for all the hard work that you did.
Thanks, Judy. We look forward to having you in St. Louis yet. We were going to be bringing Judy in soon, and because of this pandemic, we weren't able to do that. But you will be here, Judy, and we'll have an opportunity for people to come out and meet you. As Judy said, Being Human, an unrepentant memoir of a disability rights activist, and Denise's books and other books by people with disabilities are readily available on Amazon and other places. I invite you to please continue this conversation and carry this message of empowerment, inclusion, and equality to all of your communities. You can learn more about the important work Starkloff Disability Institute is doing and find community resources at our website, starkloff.org. And I want to give a shout out myself to the great team, my staff team, who led by Scott Thompson, but joined by Maggie Mahoney, Dallas Adams, and Lori Becker, and Brian Chow. You guys did a great job on this. Thank you, thank you. Stay safe, everyone. Lead on.
Bye, love you all.
Love you.
Love you.
Good night, everybody.
You can.